Hello, we are so excited to have Mikki Willis with us today. He is a gifted filmmaker and really tackling the most critical issues in our world today. And the filmmaker of the Plandemic series, the third installment, The Great Awakening. I got to see the DFW premiere last night. Welcome to the studio, Mikki.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Yes, well, I just want to start out by kind of zooming out a little bit, if you will. Control and power, those seem to be some of the recurring themes in your films. Can you talk broadly about those concepts and how you're encountering them today?
Well, absolutely. I think it's very important that all Americans understand that we are at war, and that sounds bombastic and extreme, but this is what would be considered fifth generation warfare, which is a different kind of a warfare. And if anyone out there has read, say, The Art of War by Sun Tzu, you understand that once we reached a point where our weaponry can blow up the entire planet, then the focus became, well, that's not good for any nation. And so how do we destroy another nation from within? And so the art of war is really the artistry of psychological warfare, and that is defeating an enemy without physically fighting. So it's ultimately getting into the heads of the enemy, turning them against each other, allowing them to destroy one another, and then once they become weak enough, then you come in and you invade and conquer. And so many decades ago, this war was waged against the United States, and people say, by who? Well, by foreign adversaries, particularly China, but with many, many traitors from within the U.S. So we have U.S. citizens working with foreign adversaries to tear down their own nation, because what they think they're going to do is to create a one world government that controls everything with its digital currency, in terms of banking, medical, all decisions made from one centralized command center, very similar to the way that the Chinese people are controlled, 1.4 billion people controlled by just a few people and the leaders of the Communist Party. That model they want to bring to the entire world. And the United States has been a firewall to prevent that globalist agenda for many decades now because of its unique mission statement, its constitution. It was developed to keep the citizens sovereign and free. That it's in itself, which is why we have to protect the Constitution fiercely. And it's the other reason why all the immigrants are trying to get here, because they want that. They realize in their nations how unprotected the individual is.
Yes.
But because the United States has such a strong foundation of sovereignty for individual citizens, it has stopped these people that have this broad agenda to ultimately control the world from fully enacting their agenda. And so we see with COVID and all of that, the world has awakened to, interesting, these protocols and mandates, none of it seemed to be really for our health. So then what was it for? It was to create a state of compliance, to get the people into a place of following authority to the degree that we will march right into our own ovens, and that we construct and we build and then we march ourselves right into them, basically. That's a little, extreme, but, in some senses, we're not far away from something like that. We are experiencing incredible tyranny from our own government. And I think it's also a wonderful thing to see so many people that just 2 or 3 years ago wouldn't have been open to even hearing this dialogue. They're now recognizing that something like this is taking place in the land of the free right here.
Terrific. I know I talked a little bit last night at the premiere about some of the silver linings, if you will, of the COVID response in America. And I thought that was just really, I've kind of been feeling it too. There were some really good silver linings. And you've been making documentaries about these topics and their byproducts for years. So can you tell us, are things getting better or worse?
Both.
Okay.
And it's necessary for things to get better, unfortunately. I've had a lot of people say, I just wish this stuff would end tomorrow. And of course, we all wish it would end tomorrow. But there's a certain point, if anyone understands addiction out there, and I've been filming addicts in recovery for a number of years, and I had a very, very dear friend of mine that became addicted, and I tried to help him, and it was his manager. He was an actor. It was his manager who said, "Sweetheart, I really appreciate what you're trying to do for Christopher, but I don't think you understand addiction. He hasn't hit rock bottom yet, and he has to hit that before he's going to really stay in recovery." And she was totally right. And so there's a sense of, if this stuff ends too early, far too many people will think that it ended because of the protocols, because of the mandates, because of all this tyranny is a good thing. And so then they will be first in line for the next booster, for the next mandate of mask wearing, for keeping children in little plastic cages at school. But now what's happened, because we have the ability to look at the outliers in this situation, the nations and the states within our own nation that didn't play the game, that we're able to look at and say, well, why is Sweden doing so much better? Why is Africa doing 4% vaccinated and they're healthier? Why are we so sick? And why is our economy so bad when these other places that didn't, they respected their citizens to say, do it if you want to, but we're not going to force you, which is the way it should be. Why are they faring so much better? And the result of that are a lot of people are able to see these results of what's worked and what isn't working. And that's triggering a real mass awakening, which is why I called my latest film The Great Awakening, because I've been traveling definitely every weekend, but multiple times a week to a different state within our nation, and really taking a pulse on where the people are in these different territories. And of course it does vary very, drastically, but I was born and raised in California, and we couldn't have left fast enough. It was, not only did they want me to leave at the time, because they all turned against us fiercely, but they actually started a petition in our little hometown to make our family move. It was quite wild. But it's a place that I've had a lot of offers to go back to, and I just haven't wanted to. But finally I go back, and just last week, and I spend a week with my wife, and we're there with a series of meetings, events, and right there in what I consider to be the belly of the beast, California, it was amazing at how many people that I know 2 years ago hated me, that were coming up to me just with nothing but gratitude, because they are recognizing what's going on, what's happening with their children and their schools. They now know what we've been fighting for. And they're fiercely, they've turned against the media narratives, which is a very promising thing.
Yes.
And as I said last night, and I'll repeat again, we've been convinced for generations. We're told never talk politics. Why do you think they say that? Yes. Right? That's the forbidden. Never share your views on politics. They don't want us conversing. No. They don't want us sharing notes. And so people bought into that for generations. And as a result, so many people just were detached from local politics. And since COVID has come out, we have literally birthed a generation of citizen journalists, because they gave up on the media. And so, as we all know, everyone watching this, people are sharing links. When something comes up, everyone's fully aware of it. And we're learning how to find alternative information, how to share it. And there's a kind of a self-regulation that happens when you're on the internet, because people, they're being trained how to be good journalists, because when you post something and it's not perfectly accurate, your whole community, your friends jump on you.
Yes.
This has been debunked. What are you doing? This is old news. This is fake news, whatever it is. And so it causes people to realize, oh, I actually want to get this right. And so let me do a little bit more homework. Let me not just share something because a friend shared it. Let me look into this first.
Yes.
And so it's training people to actually find the truth. And that is an incredible, one of the amazing unintended consequences of COVID, that it has caused people to become self-informed, find their own truth. And for me, that's one step away from what I think is going to be the massive saving grace for humanity, which is when we learn how to tune into this thing we call our intuition, which to me, it's really having a connection with God, that we're receiving that divine intelligence and not just the opinion of other humans.
Yes.
And so I think we're one step away from tuning into that great resource that leads us all into the proper direction of how to sustain and give birth to a life that is right, a life that is in the direction that we were intended to grow and evolve by being more focused parents, spouses, friends, neighbors. It seems that things are pushing us back into a more organic way of being with each other. And people are learning how to grow their own food.
Mm-hmm.
They're starting to think about these things now, where before they were just kind of divorcing from, any of that stuff where we need our hands in the soil. And they were just like, let somebody else do it, and I'll just be here in my cubicle. But now people are starting to think about what their water sources are and what their local, their counties are doing and who's running for the school board. Like, parents are starting to pay attention.
Yes.
And it's a wonderful thing.
It is. Very good. Well, what I have always been struck by your movies, including the one, The Great Awakening, is that you cover a lot of just really heavy, even fearful topics, but you are able to do it in a way where, in an approach that leaves people with positivity. So can you talk about your ability or, just your framing as a filmmaker on how you're able to tackle such meaty, heavy topics, but still, give people some certainty or hope?
Sure. It's a reflection of where I am as a human being, because a few years ago, it really struck me that I've heard these cliches, you've heard for years that things don't happen to you, they happen for you. And it's easy to say these things, but then, most of the time we resist what happens to us. But I look back at my life, and I've had a lot of, as I unveil in the movie, some of the, what people might call tragedies. A lot of things that have happened in my life that people could look at as that might be a tragedy or bad luck or whatever it is. But if we stop to think about the stuff in life that has been the most painful, it's typically also the most valuable. We grow from those, losing a loved one, from a divorce, from a death, from a failure, from being fired, from whatever it might be. There's something that happens when we face the challenge of an emotional event that makes us stronger. It's literally our hero's journey of building, thickening our skin and creating the muscle memory to move forward, to step fully into what we were born to be. And so the reason that I couldn't do the job I do without having this perspective on life, because we see a lot of footage. We see the footage that people see on the news, we see it before it gets blurred out. So as anything you can imagine, we see that footage first, and that can certainly make us very cynical, and we could lose hope in humanity. But when you approach it from what I call divinity consciousness, which is, if everything is divine, even the stuff that really hurts, that doesn't feel right, if we can call it divine, we move through it much swifter. We learn from it, and we grow beyond that type of experience. I believe because we get stuck sometimes not doing that, that's why history keeps repeating itself. It's almost like, let's try this again, people.
Yeah.
Here's another event for you guys, another opportunity, and then we cry victim, and then we, a lot of times, and I can relate to this because I feel like this is something that I grew through. So a quick story, I was at the World Trade Center when it was attacked in 2001. And I did search and rescue and body recovery for 3 days. And there was a point, kind of the crossroads of my life, that old fable of meeting at the crossroads and getting to decide which direction am I going to go for the rest of my life here. And it was presented to me as, you could use this circumstance, because we picked up body parts. You could use this to justify a life of irresponsibility. I could use this as a crutch to get government assistance, which a lot of people I was with all did that. And I said, no, I don't want any part of that. I don't want the government's money. I'm not a victim of this. I'm honored that I got to be there. I decided to turn it into a plus instead of a negative. And that's, I think, what's kept me healthy, because even my buddy that I was with there, he's going through major health issues now, 20 some odd years later. And some people I was with are no longer alive because of what we were breathing while we were there. But that mentality of this happened for me and not to me, this is divine, and somehow God chose me to be here, so I'm not going to curse this, I'm going to bless it with gratitude. And from that, take with me the lesson that's available here so I can move forward in life and not be stagnant. And that has proven to me through the years to be just that choice we get to make. Those choice points that we make determine literally our health, and definitely our mental health. And that one simple choice, I think, kept me away from feeling like I was a victim of the circumstance, to let me use this as a catalyst to do something good in the world. And that was the choice I made. And I'm grateful. I'm always just deeply grateful that somehow, I didn't even live in New York.
Yeah.
I was there to talk about a distribution deal for my first movie. And I just happened to be there during that moment. And what a blessing, because
Wow.
unfortunately, sometimes it takes something that big to wake us up. And I think I was so lost in the circuitry of Hollywood at the time that I needed something so ego-shattering for me to wake up, to look beyond the materialistic goals that I had and the selfishness of trying to gain that recognition and that power and those awards and those accolades and the house and the car. I watched the finest automobiles on the planet be demolished by rescue workers that were all lined up on Wall Street. So suddenly the whole material world to me was just dust. So then I was left with the question of, if this isn't it, what is it? And the answer for me was, life, people. We're all here breathing asbestos and everything you can imagine. And these incredible men and women who know this, they're not leaving the scene, because if they can save one human life, they're going to risk their own. And I said to myself in that moment, this is who we are, never forget. And because I saw how good humanity is when something happens so much bigger than their own personas, they snap into action in such a beautiful, generous way that informed me that we just have to get back to truly who we are.
Yeah.
Because we've been manipulated into thinking we're something else. And it's not organic and it's not natural. And so for me, it's been an unfolding process of deciphering between what's normal and what's natural in life, and doing my best to move towards what's normal. To move towards what's natural.
Yeah.
To be a natural father, to be a natural husband, to have natural relationships, and not just to follow the habitual patterns of a society that has been demoralized.
That, I don't know where we go on from here. And that was very moving. And I had not heard that story before from 9/11. So thank you. And I'm just so thankful that you are so geared towards, turning the bad into blessing and making impacts. So that's tremendous. Let's shift gears right quick. And can you provide a little bit of insight into how you do your research and your interview process for your films?
Yeah, well, it varies. And I feel like after The Great Awakening, I had this moment where I thought, I actually feel like I just learned how to make a good documentary after The Great Awakening. And what I mean by that is I've been doing a little bit backwards. And at least for the style of documentaries that I make. And that is, a subject matter comes up, we agree this is the subject matter we want to approach. And then we interview a bunch of people who care about that subject. And then we piece together their interviews to make a narrative. And I've realized during the last one that that's probably not the way I'm going to do it from now on, because a lot of interviews don't make it into the movie. And what's better is that we do the research, we decide on the subject, and then I write out a framework of what that movie is going to be from beginning to end. And then I find the people that speak right into those certain topics, so that it's very succinct and direct, So I'm not just asking everyone, typically we'll do a 2.5 hour interview about everything. And then we have to, piece these things together. But if somebody is really about the children, let's talk about that. They're the person that's going to speak about that subject. And so the Great Awakening had a lot of amazing people. It was the toughest thing for me, and I still deal with it daily, because when somebody comes to give me their time and we fly them in to our studio and they sit down and they give us an interview, and then many months later we release a movie and they're not even in it. I feel terrible when that happens. And I had to do that with The Great Awakening. There was a decision we made 2 days before the screening that we can either keep this movie 20 minutes longer, and we all know it's too long, or we can take 20 minutes out. And we're gonna have to lose some great voices in this. But you have to make the choice for the story, for the impact of the story. You can't make the choice, well, this person flew out, so let's put them in. You have to make the highest choice based upon the totality of the movie. And so typically what we do is the next film that we're gonna do is about really correcting the climate change narrative. I've been an environmentalist for almost 30 years. I've been studying this for 27 years. And while, the climate is changing, and it always has and it always will, while a portion of it is absolutely, all living things contribute to the warming of our planet. These things are true. There is no climate disaster. It is not an existential threat to humanity. What we need to focus on is pollution, because we are polluting this planet terribly. Our water, our air, our soil, all of it. It's just reality. And we have the technology. With a portion of the money we keep sending to the Ukraine, we can solve it all tomorrow. But the politicians never want to solve the problems, because that's what keeps them in power. And so we're going to make a movie to describe that. And the way I approach that movie is we declare this is what we're doing next. And then we start to look and study all the voices that are speaking out about this. And there's many different subject matters within this one. We can talk about direct energy weapons, and how fires can be started, and how weather manipulation happens, and all the stuff that was considered conspiracy theory just a few years ago. People are now going, oh, so you can seed the clouds and make the clouds rain or stop raining. And of course, they've been bragging about this forever, and this stuff has been happening since the 40s. And so it's all declassified and out there for people if they just pay attention to it. And so we start learning ourselves, let's get into all the details of what we need to cover, and then we'll create a narrative, and then I'll bring in researchers that are already keyed into the subject. And sometimes it's scientists and people who've already made movies about it, and I'll bring them in and I'll say, can I employ you as a researcher, and you've already have 20 years of knowledge on this, and help us expedite the research process. And let's get together, and then we create all the categories that we're going to talk about that are important. And then in this particular case, then I'm going to write out the whole narrative of what this movie should be. And then we start interviewing people for those certain parts. And I think it's going to make the process swifter, less expensive, and we won't have so many people left on the cutting room floor, which will definitely feel a lot better in the end.
Very good. Well, what role do you think your documentaries play in raising awareness about control, just broadly, but specifically about vaccines and mandates and injuries?
Well, I think there's a lot of people out there that are sharing this information far and wide. I think if we just look at Plandemic 1, people ask me all the time, how were you so quick to have a documentary out May 4th of 2020, and it's been 100% validated? How did that happen? And the answer to that is because I knew Anthony Fauci, and Anthony Fauci oversaw the AIDS epidemic in the 80s and 90s and prescribed a medicine that killed over 300,000 innocent people, and my brother was one of them. And so when I saw that he was back, and which kind of blew my mind, I remember a lot of people in my brother's community talking about this horrible little, I remember first time I ever heard the term Napoleon complex, this little Napoleon who was killing people. I remember hearing that. I was much, much younger and had no internet, no way I wasn't a researcher or an investigative filmmaker at the time. So I just remember hearing that and just wanting to put it all behind me and mourn, because my mom died a month later. And so just kind of mourn the loss of my brother and mother and move on with my life. But then 30 years later, he materializes here as the saint of the COVID response situation, and it just blew my mind that he would still even have a job after knowing how he, what he did in the 80s and 90s, and so the Plandemic 1, there's no doubt, and because I hear it from people last night while I was meeting people after the screening, so many people who say thank you. Because of Plandemic 1, I didn't get vaccinated and I didn't vaccinate my children. And then they always have stories about the other side of their family who did.
Yes.
And then their stories are, my dad had a heart attack, my aunt had a stroke, my 25-year-old nephew is dealing with myocarditis. It's like all these stories of everyone in their family who's now suffered some kind of reaction to the vaccine. So they say, thank you for doing that. And one of the reasons that I'm grateful that, of course, we had no idea that Plandemic 1 would become the most seen independent movie in history. You can't plan something like that. But it was the timing. I don't know that it'll ever happen again for any other movie unless those circumstances are created again, which I don't think humanity is going to allow that again. We literally had a captive audience. We had people on lockdowns in their homes, and a lot of people who had enough common sense to know, I don't know what's going on, but something's not right.
Something's not right.
Something's not right. And so what I hear from people a lot is when they saw Plandemic 1, it had them, they always say to me, you helped me know that I wasn't crazy and that I wasn't alone. And so I know that it had a measurable impact because people were contained in their homes and they started sharing this far and wide, and they felt it in their heart that like this is the truth. That stuff they're saying on MSNBC and CNN and even Fox, that's not the truth. Something's going on here. And that really opened my eyes to, because I was committed to not profiting off the Plandemic brand. And it really created this model of, which I just call it the generosity model of, if I'm going to make my films off of donations from the people and in turn give it back to them for free, but let them have the file so that the censors out there, if it's just on my website, then they just zap our website, which is what they did with Plandemic 1 until I learned my lesson. They, we bought our URL from GoDaddy, and GoDaddy
nuked it.
And then, so we're like, no one can find us now. So I gave the file to the whole world and I said, it's yours. No restrictions. I will not come after you. Do whatever you want to do with it. It's your movie. You helped me fund it. It's your movie. And the people, it was so inspiring because I call it a people-powered distribution model. And they just spread it all over the world. And so the other movies we've done the same thing with. We've just said, let's raise enough money to make the movie, and then we just give it to the people. But in answer to your question, it's clear that the media that people are developing, alternative media that are telling the truth out there, is literally activating a global awakening on the planet. And it's amazing because almost no one is well-funded. And so we're these little companies, little pods of companies all over the world that are sometimes teams of 3, my team only like 8 people, and we're competing with the giant Goliath of mainstream media and getting more views from them. People watch them these days, but they normally don't watch them to discover the truth. They watch them just so they can see how far into the lies are they going these days.
Right.
Very few people are listening to mainstream media like they used to. And that's another incredible accomplishment.
That's right. Well, I have long contended, it feels like the fight here at Texans for Vaccine Choice is the modern day David and Goliath. And I was like, we will never match Big Pharma's money, but they will never match the love for our children or the passion we have for our families. And we know how that story ended.
Well, that's the thing that I think they're probably just waking up to, they meaning they, are waking up to is the most fierce humans I've ever seen on this planet is a parent of a vaccine-injured child. And I know a lot of fierce warriors out there, but when you have damaged someone's baby, these are unstoppable people. Mostly mothers that I've witnessed. It's so inspiring to see these mothers who just a few years ago, I mean, it's horrible to think of what happened to them, that they had to step out to be a warrior. But again, in the realm of divine consciousness, divine, things being on track and perfect in an odd way, this is what it takes sometimes,
Yeah.
you know? And so God bless those children who somehow made the sacrifice to allow mommy and daddy to step into fully who and what they are, and to do what they were meant to do on this planet for the rest of humanity. I really see it as those are the true heroes of this movement. And they are willing to die for the cause. And so these people that are doing damage out there, they don't understand what they're actually creating in the world. They're creating an army of citizens that will not back down. And that is the beginning of something that we've never seen on this planet. Because if you look at the history of the master-slave relationship, back to the cradle of civilization, if you understand that these elite families and forces, from the kings and queens and pharaohs, if you ask yourself, how did they get all the stuff built in their world when there was no heavy machinery? And they used slave labor. And these slaves were, because of the work they do, they're fit and monstrous. And then you have these fat little out of shape elites that are, you know, there might be 2,000 of them and 20,000 slaves. How do they control those slaves? They don't have the technology that we have today, the weaponry and all of that. So how did they control those slaves? Through the mind. Mm-hmm. And that has never changed. And so once we wake up to that, it's the elite convincing these, what they deem to be lower class people, convincing them that as they sit on their gold thrones, that they are anointed ones with a direct line to the gods, and that if they dare even think a thought against the powerful ones, they will be destroyed. And so they would commonly throw someone to the lions and have a public display to convince the other slaves, like, oh, this happens when you even have a thought. So they're not even free in their own mind to think for themselves, because they've manipulated them to such a degree that they are so convinced that this person has a power that they don't have. And that game has never ended. It happens today.
Yes.
And people need to wake up to that these people are not anointed. That all of humanity, everybody, has the potential to do something extraordinary. And we were actually born with and charged with the responsibility to do something extraordinary. But this society that we've all allowed to be built around us leaves us in this place of being so busy, so distracted, and so numbed by fear that we become maintenance workers. Our goal then is to just pay the bills.
Yep.
Just make sure that we keep our phone on, we keep a house, you know, roof over our head, and we don't have any time for anything else, no time to eat with our children anymore, have proper dinner. Our kids are up staring at an iPad as they munch on crap that will make them lifelong, you know, victims for big pharma to take advantage of. And nobody has the time. We know it's wrong, we know it's happening, but no one has the time, so they think, to do something about it. But I think we underestimate what we're capable of the moment we snap to grid and realize there's no one coming to save us. We are truly the ones we've been waiting for.
Yes.
And as every iconic movie that's ever been made out there has said to some degree, you know, the force is within. And the beautiful thing is, I think a lot of humans around the world are waking up to realize that finally. So I think what's about to come for us in the next few years, we're going to go through a darker period, and it's necessary. As I said last night, it's almost like when you've eaten something horrible and it's got to come out of the system, and it's painful and it hurts, and there's that dreaded moment of just that you have to release it. That purging of what's toxic is what's happening globally right now. And the other side of it is wellness.
Well, we will be expectant for that when we get to the other side of that, for sure. So one of your next big projects is another documentary called Follow the Silenced.
Yes.
Yes. So can you give our audience a brief overview of that film and why you thought it was an important topic to tackle?
Absolutely. So Follow the Silenced is about a group of wonderful people who were told to follow the science, and they did, and as a result, their lives will never be the same. They've been extremely injured by vaccines, by the trials, and they range from common everyday people to some notable musicians and outspoken advocates for freedom now. And I've hired this was starting to be built while I was in the middle of directing a couple of films myself. So I hired an incredible director named Matthew Guthrie, who you'll be sitting down with soon.
Yes.
And he has been doing the most incredible job of passionately and compassionately following the lives of these individuals for over 2 years now. We originally thought the film would just tell the story of the injuries, what happened. We call it Follow the Silenced because these people, as soon as they were injured, they started to speak out to say, uh-oh, be careful. And then they went from being heroes to being shut out of the world and, platforms, completely deplatformed and dehumanized. And so we're giving them a voice. And these are, fathers of children, 15-year-old children who took the vaccine and just a short time later collapsed and died on the basketball court. These are dancers who will never dance again. These are young people who are confined to wheelchairs. And nobody wants these stories told, so we're telling them. And Matthew Guthrie and then his editing partner, who is all part of my company right now, and two of the most incredibly caring and talented individuals. I have to say, if I've nailed anything in life, it was hiring these two to take on this project. They have stayed with it the whole time. We thought it would be in and out in the world in 6 months, but then it became clear. Matt kept coming to me and saying, I think we really need to keep following these people and trust me on this. We need to go a little longer and we want to get their healing process. We want to get the full story of what happens to these people in the long-term effect. And I trust him and I said, okay, let's do it. We don't have the financing, but we're going to make it work. And that's another part of the story too, is just really surrendering to this thing we call faith, which I understand at a level now that I've never understood before, of when you're in true service. And I'll say I spent many years believing that I was in service, but I look back now, I can understand that there was still a lot of me involved in that. I was still gaining something from being in service. But when you do something where you really leave yourself out of the equation, and it's not about profit, it's not about accolades, it's not about advancing your career, but let us be in service to something that we know is right. That there are divine forces that take over and make everything happen. And so I spent most of my life, tracking down money and begging for money and meeting with investors and trying to get things done. And then you go over budget and then it's almost impossible to get more money. And now it's just whatever needs to happen, it just happens. And if we find out, it's along the way, we've had so many, what some might call miracles, where we look at our finances and we say, oh no, we're $50,000 short this month to pay everyone. And my wife goes, we just got a $50,000 donation. It's like the next day, it just happens. And so we just don't worry about it anymore. We're doing our best to clear out our own, those unhealthy habitual patterns of self-service. And I don't mean that in a way of we don't care about ourselves, because that can lead you into this thing we call collectivism, where you forget about thyself, and there's a reason that when you're on an airplane they say put that mask on first. We all need to be healthy first, so I don't mean don't tend to yourself, but to be involved in this type of work and to have some type of hidden agenda of self-gratification is just simply wrong. Yeah. And the more that we can kind of purge that out of the system and learn what it feels like to be in pure service, to understand even when we receive accolades and compliments, to know where those really belong, to not hold that with the body, to think it's me. And the reason that has, I'm aware of that, is after 30-some years in Hollywood and watching a lot of really good people, my friends, come in as these wide-eyed, beautiful people with a dream, and then in 10 years, Hollywood turns them into something else. And they literally sell their souls in a certain way. And they believed all the hype about themselves, and they start to become the characters that they play on TV. And they don't even know who they are anymore. And it's one of the reasons that so many celebrities are just so screwed up. And the divorce rate, and their children are messed up, and they're all transgender, and they're celebrities that have 4 kids, and all of them are transgender. The odds of that says something's going on at home that's not right. And so, moving back into the Follow the Silence, I always call it a moving portrait, because it is a stunningly beautiful, moving portrait of these lives of these people who have been, the media tried to cut their tongues out. And through Matt's really diligent and wonderfully compassionate work, is a man who truly cares about people. And there isn't a person in this movie, some of them I met later, because he would travel all over the world basically interviewing these people, and I'd meet them later, and they would say that they just interviewed with Matt, and just how much they love him. And the reason for that is because he's just a person who truly cares about the person that's sitting across from him. And I think if all artists and all filmmakers and media people took that on, to where it's not just an interview, so we can, how many likes can we get and what kind of views are we going to get, but can we care more about each other?
Right.
And that's what this film, within its DNA, is this really beautiful, poetic DNA of how much we care about the people that are in the film, but ultimately how much we care about the gift of life. And so we're in partnership with Texans for Vaccine Choice, which we're incredibly grateful for, because that was again one of those moments where I bootstrapped the movie for about 1.5 years, and then it just reached a point where I said, I'm bootstrapping 3 movies right now. My wife came to me and she said, so our savings is gone. And so I don't know how much longer we can do this. And then all of a sudden, Texans for Vaccine Choice stepped in and said, we'll provide the finishing funds for the movie. And because this movie is so important, we need to get it out there. And so we're grateful for the partnership. And I'm very excited to get this movie out to the world so that people can understand not only what happened to these people, but their journey towards recovery. Because we know we all have friends and family members now that need to understand how to rise above the damage that's been done to them.
That's right. Well, I just want to say it has been an honor to partner with both of you on this film. I'm excited about seeing it because, we long contend that these vaccine injury stories must be told, and the powers that be go out of their way to quash them. But these are lives. I talk all the time about, they say let's pretend that this 1 in a million rate is right. It's 100% when it happens to you. Yeah. I mean, we know that it's not 1%, but even if it's 1% of children that are born in Texas this year, it's 40,000 kids. Yeah. They're saying that that's an acceptable injury rate, and it's just evil.
What's the actual injury rate? Do you know?
I don't know.
It's a lot more than 1%.
Yeah. Well, for COVID specifically, absolutely. Yeah. And those stories must be told. So thank you for shining a light on that. And while I know that you have a lot of faith with your donations and such, where do people find you if they want to partner with you financially?
They go to plandemicseries.com, and all 3 Plandemic movies are there for free. Plandemicseries.com, Plandemic 1, 2, and 3. My book is there for free, the Plandemic book. Just download the audio, no strings attached. It's all there for you. And there's a donation button right front and center there. I welcome donations and thank anyone who's able to do that, because our next film is to straighten out the climate narrative, as I mentioned, and that's a really important one, because understanding what these agendas are, the climate narrative is the final narrative. That's the narrative that they're going to use to justify herding everyone into what they call 15-minute cities, which are basically open-air prisons to survey everyone. I mean, just consider back years ago when I was a kind of a fresh environmentalist, And the first time I learned that they limit the amount, in many states, they limit the amount of rain that people can catch. I thought, what? Why? Falls from the sky, and everyone's talking about water shortage, and why wouldn't you be incentivizing the public to capture rain? There's some states where they won't allow it at all, and there's some states that say 40 gallons and that's it. Why? I didn't get this for years. I thought, what a weird thing, because I actually thought, I believed there were some benevolent forces there. So what possibly could that choice, what good could that choice serve? And then COVID happens, and all the stores, all the businesses that said, it is our constitutional right to make our own choice. You're not going to force me to close down my 5th generation mom and pop shop. We're going to stay open. What did the local governments do? Shut off the power and water.
Yep. And
so they want everyone on a grid. And if they really cared about the environment, I'll put it this way. A lot of elites talk about overpopulation. And we're at 8 billion people on this planet right now. Out of land, the amount of land on this planet is 29%. And the rest is water. 29% land. Out of that land, 7% is not inhabitable. It's high desert or Arctic, whatever it might be. So that leaves 22% of livable land. We currently occupy 1 to 2% of that.
Wow.
So we have like 20% left. It would take us thousands of years to be overpopulated on this planet. The problem is they keep pushing everyone into these cities. While we have these rural areas ripe and ready with good soil and ready to grow food and everything we might need, why wouldn't our government be incentivizing people to move out instead of inward? Get out there and capture your own rain and grow your own food and generate your own power. Why wouldn't they be doing this if they really, truly cared about it? Because they don't. So a lot of that we're going to expose in this next film, so that we can start inform the public of what's really going on, especially when it comes to energy independence. All this push, we got these dummies out there with Just Stop Oil, blocking traffic. I used to be one of them. I have video of me doing undercover work with Jane Fonda, closing down banks and oil pipelines, because I thought oil was the most evil thing on the planet. It's not. We certainly have a lot to learn, and we can upgrade the way that we extract it, deliver it, and burn it. Absolutely. A lot of the oil companies, they don't care. They would rather be sued by contaminating local water supplies than they would go through all the retrofitting of pipelines and actually spending the money to do it right, so they don't burst. So we need to hold those companies accountable for that. But energy independence for our nation, particularly for third world nations, is so important. Oil is one of the only things that can save India and pull it out of being a third world nation. There's a lot of territories like that. So these people that think they're fighting for humanity are literally fighting against humanity. And so we need to, now I'm on the far other side of this fight, fighting to have people understand the true value of coal and oil, hoping that we move towards nuclear, because that's really where the best energy source is. Mm-hmm. But people have also been so brainwashed that it's so deadly and so dangerous. Well, when you understand, the style of reactors that we have, which is like phase 1 here in the U.S. and China has phase 3, if we weren't so terrified of nuclear, we'd put money into upgrading what we have, and they'd be much, much more safe, and we'd have clean energy and, most importantly, energy independence in our nation. So we don't any longer have to rely on Saudi Arabia and China and all these other factors that have a stranglehold on us just to survive. And so we're going to correct that narrative with the next film. So if anyone would like to contribute to that and gets excited about that subject, please feel free to donate. And then we're also, I want to create something short and fast. I'm talking with people right now to try to figure out what the heck happened to the children of Maui. Mm-hmm. So that's another thing to have people contribute to. I want to send some cameras out there, and I'm working with a security team out there who's been investigating to try to find out where these children are and what really happened to them. And there's a couple other projects regarding immigration and border security that we're working on too. So all the donations go to all these projects that we're involved in.
Tremendous. Well, this has been truly inspiring and such an honor to sit down with you and hear your heart and your vision. So thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes.